Egypt is an ancient civilization that emerged in northeast Africa around 3150 BC. It was known for its developed technology, advanced religion, and impressive architecture, including the iconic pyramids. However, like many societies throughout history, slavery was an integral part of Egyptian society. Slavery in Egypt dates back to the pre-dynastic period, around 6000 BCE. At that time, slavery was not based on race or ethnicity, but rather on one's social status or economic situation. Slavery was a common practice that existed for thousands of years. Slaves were typically prisoners of war, criminals, or individuals who sold themselves into slavery to pay off debts. They were considered property of their owners and were subjected to harsh conditions, including physical labor, long hours, and meager living conditions. Ancient Egyptian slaves were employed for various tasks such as domestic work, building construction, and labor in the fields. Although they had a significant impact on the economy, they often suffered abuse and weren't paid for their labor. Slaves worked in brutal conditions, including physical torture and being required to work long shifts without breaks or sufficient food. They lived in cramped spaces with little privacy. Despite the harsh conditions, slaves contributed significantly to the development of ancient Egypt's infrastructure, including building pyramids and temples. Not all slaves were treated equally in ancient Egypt. While the majority of slaves were subjected to harsh conditions and forced to work in manual labor, some slaves were employed in skilled professions and had a higher social status. These skilled slaves, known as household slaves, were in charge of tasks such as cooking, cleaning, and even managing their owners' finances. Their owners typically educated and trained them, allowing them to perform their duties more effectively. Due to their expertise and knowledge, these skilled slaves often held a higher status within Egyptian society. They were treated with greater respect and given more privileges than their counterparts who were used for manual labor. However, even though some slaves had a higher status, they were still considered property and did not have the same rights as free citizens. Human sacrifice was not a widespread practice in ancient Egypt, but it did occur in certain circumstances. The act of human sacrifice involved the intentional killing of a human being, usually in a ritualistic manner, to please or appease the gods. The ancient Egyptians believed that the gods needed to be appeased through various rituals and offerings. Incestuous marriages were somewhat common practice in ancient Egypt, especially among the royal family. Incestuous marriages were seen as a way to keep the bloodlines pure and to maintain a tight grip on power. The most famous example of this is the marriage between Cleopatra VII and her brother, Ptolemy VIII. Despite the prevalence of these marriages, they were not without controversy. Some people saw them as immoral and contrary to the laws of nature. Today, incestuous marriages are considered taboo in most societies and are even illegal in many countries. Mummification of animals was a common practice in ancient Egypt, where animals were considered sacred and believed to possess divine qualities. The mummification process for animals in ancient Egypt was similar to that of humans, although less complex. The body was then wrapped in linen bandages and placed in a decorated coffin or sarcophagus. The exact process varied depending on the animal and its status. Some animals, such as cats and birds, were simply wrapped in linen and placed in small jars. The mummification of animals was a significant part of religious practice in ancient Egypt. The practice was so widespread that millions of animal mummies have been found in tombs and burial sites throughout Egypt. Like all human societies, ancient Egyptians were not immune to diseases. Although medical knowledge was limited at the time, evidence suggests that ancient Egyptians were aware of some illnesses and had treatments for them. However, many diseases that are easily treatable today, such as the common cold or flu, were potentially life-threatening in ancient times. The spread of disease made worse by poor sanitation and hygiene, which allowed germs to flourish. In spite of these challenges, the ancient Egyptians were able to develop some effective treatments for certain diseases. For example, they used honey as an antibiotic and prescribed herbs and other natural remedies to alleviate symptoms. Nevertheless, many illnesses were simply beyond their reach and medical knowledge, and death from disease was a common occurrence in ancient Egypt. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.